It's 4 o'clock on a Thursday, and you know what that means, don't you guys? It's time for another exciting episode of Taxi's Quarantini Happy Hour. Woohoo! And guess who just had a big tumbler full of iced coffee? Me, yeah! Woohoo! And thank you, fake band. Thank you, fake audience. Let's say hello to the real audience. Wow. Bob Gunnerfelt, Dan Weber, Akira Canyon, Darren Moss, Rick Cabot Podmore, John Pearson, Nancy Khalil, Darren Fletcher, Andre Stepanian, Ian Shortall, Michael Reschke, Michael McGraw, Martin Gravel, Pete Mason, Peter Rayhill. Hello. How are you guys and gal? Singular at the moment. Jesse J. Peck. I'm waiting to see if anybody, I don't like leaving people out, so I want to see if anybody else is in there. Steve Thompson. Joseph Alonzo. Oh, man. Peter Rayhill. It is the usual suspects, isn't it? Oh, man. Aura Ford. Hello. Tony Salazzo. Okay, let's start the show. Giovanni Lanza, our famous Italian movie star gentleman. I love your name. If I have any more kids, which is highly doubtful at this stage of my life, and one of them turns out to be a boy, I'm going to name it Giovanni Lanza. I love that name. It's just awesome. Edmund Red. Okay, so first and foremost, let's see. What did I want to tell you? Joseph Alonzo, yellow. Speaking of yellow, look at the flowers. I picked those myself about an hour ago. Walked out in front of the house, and there they were in half bloom. They still have a little ways to go, but the other ones were just like falling over. Jesse J. Peck, what are you guilty of? And Cass McKenty, Goat Man in the house. Yuka Reschke, watching with my husband. Oh, I hope you prepared him in advance. Oh, man, I literally just chugged. I was just dragging my butt around the house today. I've been working like crazy and just like sitting here dozing off at the computer. Did I get the vase free with the shirt? No, actually, that vase is about 20 years old, I think. There's Cass's goat. Jesse's guilty of being a regular. Well, I'm glad you are, Jesse. Anyway, yeah, so just crazy. And as soon as I get off the show, I've got to do a Zoom with a music library in Australia, or music licensing company in Australia that might be looking for some stuff for a TV commercial. So we got a Zoom about that. Yes, you guys are definitely my entourage. Jim Stamper, hello. So, okay, I made a few notes. Hey, Marcus, how are you? Was just thinking about you about 10 minutes ago. And now I'm done. That's it. It's all over. Daryl Berman, Jan Weilage, Rick White. Man, big crowd today. Mark Reel. All right. Okay, so I don't even know what today is. Today is Thursday, right? Yes, it is, because yesterday was garbage day. George Gillen, Joe Tarsha is the name of the founder of Sigma Sound in Philly that you and I both couldn't think of the other day. What a legend. Your background, too, is amazing, Michael. Much respect. Well, thank you, George. Yeah, Joe was he was a cool guy. I loved his little, he had a beard long before it was fashionable. Anyway, Michael Reschke, Yuka. Oh, I got you. Okay, Yuka is your wife. All right. Well, you two behave yourselves in the chat room. I don't want any hanky panky going on in there today. All right. Wait till the show's over. Um, all right. So, on a not really serious note, but man, I had about an hour-long phone conversation with a music library owner. Today's Thursday. Here, I can check my book. Hang on. By the way, yeah, I know everybody uses your phone. I use this at a glance. I've been using these since the 90s, like actually since the 80s, and I've saved every one of them. Literally every year. I put them on a shelf. I also always have notebooks going like that, and I save all this stuff. And you know what? It's really good to save it because you never know when you're going to need to go back in time and go, oh, that was 2014 in the springtime. Oh, look at that. That's when I made that phone call. I was in a lawsuit once, and these things came in super duper handy. It's called contemporaneous evidence. So I advise you all to keep your stuff on paper because putting it on your phone, yeah, you tend to not save it, you know? What day was it? It was yesterday. Okay. So yesterday, I had probably an hour-long phone conversation with a really good friend of mine who's a music library owner. Has many, many taxi members in his catalog. And he was just going on and on and on about dopey things that musicians do. And he said, he actually reached out to me and said, I want to do an episode of your show with you to talk about all these dopey things. He said, it's just amazing how people can be so good at making music and so bad at the business end of things. He was just astonished. And frankly, I'd heard it all before from other people I know in the industry. And he's like a really good-natured person, but he was riled about this stuff, not to the point of like pissed off and I'm going to, like do damage to these people or anything. Martin Gravel, let's talk about dope. Stupid musician tricks. Yep. Anyway, he was just going on and on. I said, man, I wish I was recording this conversation. We could just use this for the show. So I invited him to like do the show today or tomorrow with me or, sooner than later. But he's actually going to do it in August. I can check the date because I wrote it in my week at a glance. And you might be wondering why. Why, oh, why? We were going to do it July 20th, but he's going to be on the road. So, Monday, August 10th. Put that in your book because that's the day that we're all going to get bitched out by a music library owner. Hello, Alex Dillon. That's all right. No demerits for being late. And Daryl143 Jazz. Hello. Welcome to the big show. And Peter Rayhill. That's right, Nancy. Peter's here. Now we can officially start. That's right, Darren. So you have until August to keep doing stupid stuff. Well said. That's exactly right. You know what? I'm not even going to try and remember some of the stuff, but it's a lot of stuff. The first 3 or 4 things he rattled off were things I was already familiar with. One of them was, people that are already signed to publishing deals and don't even know it. Just all that kind of stuff. But he was very articulate about it. Excuse me. And I said, well, why don't we just hurry up and do it? And he said, no. He said, I actually need some time. I want to build a really, really comprehensive list. So in that show, Ariana and I will promo the crap out of it to make sure that we get a really big turnout because we want as many people to hear this as possible. and I will get the list from him in advance, and we will do it in such a way that we can take each of those complaints that he has and make each of them a segment for later publication on YouTube as well, so that you don't have to watch the whole episode, to go find the part that you want to go back to. We'll do it, stupid musician trick number 1, there's a YouTube video. Stupid musician trick number 2, there's another YouTube video. We will probably use up all the hard drive space on YouTube because apparently he's got a lot of them. Oh, man. Anyway, and he's like really in your corner. This is a gentleman that really, really, really he gets a thrill out of getting you guys placements. And can I add pictures? Actually I can. It's a little bit of a pain in the butt, but we can add pictures. And I'm going to talk about something shortly that I wish that I had gone back. I just had this idea about a half an hour ago. I wish I'd gone back into my Apple Photos to pull out the pictures, because I don't know if you remember, but many years ago, one of the earliest taxi TVs I did back when we were still on Ustream was about mixing. And I used pictures of, at the time, my kids were little, they were, I don't know, in primary school. And they had all those little plastic molded chairs. You buy your kids that thing that's like a injection molded dollhouse, and then it's got in a little picnic table and the little colorful chairs and all that stuff. So I set it out in our backyard because, as you might remember, as I'm looking at the camera right now, right over the top of the camera, I'm looking out at a mountain range that is about 7/8 of a mile away from where I'm sitting right now. And hey, Scott Hansen, how are you, buddy? Gladiolas, that's right. Picked from the Lasco family farm recently, like half an hour ago or so. Anyway, we've got, the patio, and then the yard, California-sized yard. By any other state standards, this would be a small yard. By California, it's like the Ponderosa. I don't know, it's probably 30 feet deep. And then beyond that, I can see the rooftops of several houses that are kind of behind us and below us because we're up on a little bit of a hill. I can see Rob Shirelli's chimney from where I'm sitting right now, which is kind of cool. Hello, Rob. And then we've got trees like in the foreground and trees in the midground. And then 7/8 of a mile away, we have the mountain range. And I'm going to tell you why that's important shortly. Does Russell Crowe smoke weed? I don't know. Yeah, no rabbits today and no squirrels today. Hey, Greg Carosa, what did you miss? You'll have to rewind the tape to find out. I don't know. I don't know if Russell Crowe smokes weed, but sometimes it looks like he gets the munchies a lot. Just saying. Flashing backyard animal update. There you go. Haven't talked about fishing yet. All right, here. I will turn the camera. Okay, so there you go. And there's my granddaughter's little tricycle out in the backyard. All right, so keep that here. I'll open up the blinds a little more, or the curtains. Now I've probably totally screwed up my light. Okay, you know what? I'm going to leave the camera like this for a little while. There's the awning that's about to get replaced. We just had the awning guy come out today. All right, so notice, see that little round table right on the other side of the window? Let's just start having this conversation now. Let's talk about mixing using the Lasco backyard as a mixing tool. Better than looking at my face. Thanks, Ian. You're never getting another forward ever. I'm kidding. They're filming episodes. That's right. MASH actually was filmed. If you were to go straight out at the mountain and then hang a left and go a few miles, I've actually been to the old set of MASH. It burned down, sadly, in the fires not that long ago. About 18 months ago, the whole MASH set out there burnt down. Hopefully they'll rebuild it, but the helipad is still there, and I just saw a picture of myself the other day. I was looking for something in my Apple Photos and saw a photograph of me standing about 10 years ago at this, the little wooden sign thing that says like Toledo, 5,623 miles. Okay, so I'm going to leave the camera pointed that way, and man, now I wish I had the awning cranked in, but it's all ripped, so we can't crank it in, and that umbrella is kind of in the way. But, I like the fact that our granddaughter's little tricycle thing is out there. Looks like a 12-foot mic stand, screen left. No, it's the umbrella. Since the awning got trashed, it was getting a little long in the tooth anyway. I think it's about 12 years old, in between sun and whatever, just, wear and tear. It was, what I want to say, windstorm just started ripping it, and then there you go. It wasn't in Agoura Hills. I think MASH was technically done in the hills of Malibu. Anyway, okay, let's get focused. So, let's talk oral landscape and mixing. And so let's say that little round table right on the other side of the window is the kick drum and the bass. It's front and it's centered, right? I wish this view was a little wider, but it's not. And also, I would put the vocal there. I'm trying to think of what else I might put in the middle, but let's just leave it for now with the bass and the kick. Oh, and the snare, kind of front and center. Obviously the vocal would have to be, loud enough that it wouldn't be getting drowned out by the snare or the kick. But then as you go, I wish I had a wireless mic right now. I'd run out in the yard. But here's the most important and most salient point about the entire thing is look at the mountain range. Notice how, because it's farther away, it has less detail. It has less color and it has less visual detail because it's farther away. Notice how the trees that are in the midground, where the color is still good and the detail is still there. So that's the point. Somebody asked a question after, I think it was yesterday's episode, something like, can you do a mixing episode with Rob or with, what's his name? Can't think of his name right now. Anyway. So, with Ron and Chris Murphy. But let's just talk the oral landscape part of mixing right now. And frankly, I'm not sure because I've never done any, like dancey pop stuff. I've never done any electro pop. All that kind of stuff may or may not apply. So let's just make this about like a typical pop rock thing or an acoustic rock thing, stuff that I would have probably done back in the day. No, that's not Rob's Chimney on the left. Rob's Chimney is the one that is center screen. See the bicycle or the tricycle? Just do a straight line from the tricycle, and I think that's Rob's Chimney. Anyway, so that is the center plane. The round table and the tricycle are center plane. And let's use Rob's Chimney as a distant focal point as well. So how do you make something sound like it's in the middle, yet further back? Well, the further away you go, the less vivid the image is. So that's exactly what happens in audio. Joseph Alonso can't see the chimney. Well, are you looking at it on a phone? Or are you looking at it on a computer? Because it's there. I can see it. I'm looking, my picture right now is roughly 4 inches wide by 3 inches tall. And I can see the chimney. It's little, but it's out there. Anyway, so if you want to make stuff sound like it's in the background, you shouldn't give it as much apparent loudness as things that are closer. Well, how do you do that? By not giving it as much volume, obviously, or level in the mix. Also, you may want to give it reverb that makes it sound, or delay that makes it sound further away. And again, this is all contingent. I spoke a lot yesterday about context. Obviously, this is context or contextual as well. But that's the overarching theory behind mixing, I believe, is picking out where things go on the aural landscape. They're on a horizon. So, if the shot were wider, if I were closer to the window, or I was actually sitting out in the backyard and you could see a wider thing, I might do acoustic guitar number 1 far left, acoustic guitar number 2 far right, and put them out around where the yard ends and the hill drops off. That would be a good place for them. Maybe even a little closer, actually on the lawn. But by doing that, now I've given a stereo spread. So you want to keep things balanced on the spread. I mean, it would look odd if we were looking at this picture right now, this panoramic or landscape. It just wouldn't feel right to me anyway if, let's say, the yard were tilted, right? I like it. It's level. It's symmetrical, other than the fact that I've got that umbrella on the stand standing out there messing up everything. I just heard my wife pull in the garage. Maybe I should make her go out in the yard and move stuff around. Oh, man. Where does the tricycle sit in your mix? Well, see, the tricycle for me would probably be like a harmony vocal part. And I'm glad you asked that question, actually, Marcus. It would be a harmony vocal part. Let's say that, here, I'm going to go move that umbrella. Whoops, hang on. Now we can't even see the tricycle. Awesome. Oh, man. All right. Well, in any case, so let's say that the umbrella stand is the lead vocal. And let's say that the tricycle, which is now somewhat obscured by the stand from the umbrella, is a single harmony part background vocal. And let's say that I wanted to do oohs or ahs or some sort of stacked vocal. I would probably then take those and move them midway out into the yard, maybe to the edge of the yard, and add a little pre-delay on them, add a little pre-delay on the reverb that I was sending. Sorry, burp. And scoot them back and make them wide. If I were doing kind of like an Eagles or Bee Gees kind of thing, I would put a longer decay on the reverb. I would probably actually roll off bottom end because they would be out there and you probably wouldn't hear the bottom end from them anyway. But then if I were going to do strings, the strings would probably be way out there past the trees. Maybe beyond the strings are out beyond the trees. Maybe the reverb is almost as far away as the mountain. Again, it's very contextual. It depends on the song and the parts and all that kind of stuff. But something I mentioned yesterday, somebody asked a question about how I would record a violin. So if you take violins or a string section and add a lot of top end because you're listening to them in solo and you want to hear the strings sound really good, but you're doing it in solo, and you add that, somewhere around 2,500 hertz, maybe something up around 4.3, or maybe even 6 or 8K. What that does is it brings them closer. It's called apparent loudness. So making things sound good on their own, out of context, and then putting them back in the picture, the landscape, it doesn't work. So there you go. There's today's tutorial about mixing and thinking in terms of an aural landscape. Any questions before I turn the camera around? You got to stare at my face for the next half hour. Betty Anderson, how are you? I feel like I should center that round table on the umbrella now. Betty's going, what the hell is going on today? There you go. Depth of mix. JP's got it. Yeah, so depth and breadth and, and width, all that stuff. So I found that when I finally learned how to mix for real, that this is what I did. I love like antique oil paintings of landscapes, usually like 18th century stuff. Love it, especially if it's like European. And when I look at those paintings, that is what I look at. Maybe there's some cows drinking out of a stream in the mid foreground. Well, they're going to have detail. You'll be able to actually see like the eyeballs on the cows. But yet the trees, when they get further back, have less detail. And then the mountain range in the background has even less detail. So, and what gives detail? Generally speaking, it's top end or, upper mids and top end is what gives detail. So making things sound pretty and making them have lots of mid-range, or not lots, but, some mid-range and some top end is just going to make them appear closer, because that's what your ear's going to hear. Umbrella on table in the middle of the yard. What then? Front to back is more important than left to right. It could be, yeah. I think very few average consumers listen to a record and actually think about what you've done as a mixer. They look for balance. If something's out of balance, they'll notice that. They may not actually vocalize that. They may not know how to define it, but they'll feel it. But if, let's say, the lead vocal is backed by the mountain and it's got no top end and it's steeped in reverb, it's going to sound like a different kind of record and inappropriately placed for many records. There's some indie singer-songwriter stuff nowadays where I would say that the vocalist is way back there and probably steeped in a lot of reverb. All right, any other questions? The name of this episode will shock some viewers. And by the way, just for the record, I really don't like that furniture on the other side of the window. I think my wife found it at like Target 20 years ago and brought it home. And somebody was staying at our house for the weekend. And I came home. I would have asked my wife to take it back because it just looks cheap and flimsy. But the gentleman staying at our house for the weekend put it all together. And I came home. And my wife said, look, whatever his name was, Ralph, but it wasn't Ralph, but, whoever it was, put the furniture together. Wasn't that so sweet of him? And I went, yeah, great. I'm so excited. Now it's been stuck here for about 20 years. Anyway, all right. How would you record the yodel in the mountain? I don't know. I don't think I've ever recorded a yodel. Is the umbrella on a very tall mic stand? Nope, it's just on your standard $20 stand, probably from Home Depot or Target, I would guess. All right. Like Post Malone's Circle, where the vocal is tons of reverb. I think Ronan explained how there's definition to the vocal, or Rowan explained. Very cool. Put furniture on eBay and buy Logic with a profit. I couldn't get $20 for that furniture. All right. Sorry to say, but now you got to look at yours truly again. Whoops. Good to go. All right, class, any other questions? Feels a little lopsided, doesn't it? Yeah, good enough. This episode is hilarious. I didn't want it to be funny, Nancy. It's supposed to be serious. Question: what is the best way to search for fellow taxi members to follow? We actually, that our programmer built a wide search function in, but I actually had him kill it. You can still find people if you know their name. You can search for them that way, but you can't search like female vocalists. And that's really a good example of why I had him kill the function. Because like I mentioned, I think maybe on yesterday's show, a few years ago, we had somebody teaching a class at the road rally that we found out some very inappropriate stuff had taken place in his life. And we just don't want anybody like going in and searching our database for nefarious purposes. So if you know somebody, if you know Nancy Kalel's name and you want to stalk her, you can actually just search her name. So there you go. Nancy, you now have a couple of stalkers. Scott Hansen, you can't be serious. I bet you hear that all day long, Scott. Yes, stalking on taxi. Good honest searches, I promise. I believe you, Pete, but not everybody, Michael, do you have experience with the Studer A800? That's the newer 24 track, right? I actually didn't even touch a Studer for much of my career until I want to say 1985, probably. I always had MCI tape machines for much of my career because Criteria and Triad Recording were both very close to the MCI factory, and much of the MCI equipment was actually kind of designed with input from engineers at Criteria. And then ultimately, when I had Triad Recording, it was literally like 2 miles, maybe even less, from the MCI factory. So whenever they would do modifications for channel strips on consoles or come up with a new product of any sort, we got to guinea pig a lot of that stuff, which was really cool. If something broke, I could call one of the guys who actually designed and built the MCI consoles. He lived like 2 minutes from my studio. He would come over at 4 o'clock in the morning and fix it for me. So the older Studer 2-inch 24 tracks, the ones that were like really big and stacked high, I barely use those. But then ultimately, in the room I worked in New York that had the SSL in it, it did have the Studer, like the newer, really sleek, sexy Studers. And I can't remember the model number. That may have been the A800. All I can tell you is that one sounded great. And apparently the older one sounded great as well. The MCI tape machines actually sounded pretty good. They certainly sounded better than the consoles. Darren Moss says, music file sizes become huge quickly. How does everyone here handle them? I don't know the answer to that. At one point, actually, between the MCIs and the Studer, was it A80 or A800? I can't remember. Anyway, I did have an Atari machine in my room for about a year, and I actually liked that machine. It didn't. It sounded neither here nor there, but it was very functional and reliable, and the transport was very smooth on that. With the search function scrapped, is there a practical purpose in uploading music to our profile in Taxi? Well, absolutely. For one thing, that's how you go in and choose what you're going to submit. Whether or not you choose to make it public is up to you. But yeah, you can share your profile with other members. We just don't want to make it so, that the average stalker can go in there. I mean, frankly, we're mostly worried about the ladies, not to, say that the females are weaker and need protecting, but there aren't that many people that stalk men. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know. Anyway, Scott Hansen, what if we want to be stalked? um, I don't know. If we had like a major, no, I was going to say if everybody says they wanted their stuff, the search function to just like, I'm looking for vocalists in New Zealand. I'm just afraid to put it back in there. It just feels too risky. Someone else asked about using disco. Anything else to add or explain about that? I personally have very little experience in disco, although I've been through like the tutorial you get before you start using it. And it was really easy to understand, and I know that the staff, that's how we send out all the music to our industry clients. And I've watched in the 2 years we've been using disco, almost all of our clients now use it. It's just, it works really well, and it's really easy to use. And I've seen other things come and go that were kind of de facto industry standards for moving around a lot of music. None of which I thought were all that great, frankly. And I really like disco, and it seems to have stuck as the thing. People still do use the box and other methods like that, but I like disco. Michael, did you work with the Bee Gees while at Criteria? A lot of pre-Night Fever tracks there are fantastic. I actually got to hold a pencil that had tape going around it once, so I was like a tensioning arm. When they used to make the big giant loops like out of a kick drum or a snare drum, this is before samplers existed, mind you. I knew all the guys in the Bee Gees. I knew the brothers Gibb, and Carl Richardson, who is their co-producer, is actually a good friend of mine. Just saw him last November. And should the road rally take place at the Westin this year, he agreed to come out and do a thing with me like I did about Fleetwood Mac last year. Albie Galutin, who was the other co-producer on the Bee Gees stuff, actually lives here in LA. So I was hanging out with both of them. They said, sure, we'd do a sit down with you at the rally. So I was probably more or less, they didn't like a lot of traffic coming in and out of their studio or their control room, but nobody gave me a raised eyebrow if I came in or out because I was actually very close with Carl. So one night I went there to ask him a question about something, and he said, here, take this pencil, go stand in the airlock, actually. And they took a kick drum and just recorded, like 30 seconds of kick drum, and then took a yardstick or a tape measure and measured between the beats. They'd mark them off with a grease pencil, and they would make the beats perfectly even. Then they would replicate it, make a giant loop out of it, and then fly that loop back up to the 24 track. So I got to hold a pencil on a BG record. And yes, there were actually the first time I ever set foot before I got the job there. I was there with an old roommate of mine. And they did allow me to go into a control room. And Carl Richardson, who ended up being, one of my main mentors, took me into the control room of Studio C. They had just finished mixing I Shot the Sheriff in that room. And they were literally like 2 days done with that record and working on some new Bee Gees stuff in that room. And he played me some stuff in that control room. And I went, okay, I absolutely have to work in this recording studio. It sounded amazing. As a matter of fact, the console from Studio C at Criteria, they made two of them. One went to Atlantic Records in New York, one went to Criteria Studios. And some years ago, I saw that console was online and it was for sale, and it was like, I want to say $5,500. And I so badly wanted to buy it and just throw it in the conference room at Taxi just so I could look at it all the time. I mean, it was literally like the flashpoint of my career, you know. It was like ground zero for me, in a good way, not that ground zero. But somebody else, actually, G. Parnett, who was the guy who started MCI and built that console, he had passed away many years ago, and his wife, I think, bought the console and donated it to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, or whatever the museum is that's in Cleveland. Scott, fill us in. What's the name of the museum in Cleveland? I believe that console's there, either there or in Seattle at the other museum. A pencil holder, a noble job that must be spelled right. Man, you guys are getting a little frisky in the chat room today. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, yep. Nancy's going to wear a surgical glove to shake my hand at the rally. You know, it scares me because I give a lot of hugs at the rally. I know so many of our members and people that I don't know that I meet, like in the chat room, you know, and would just love to give everybody a hug. But no hugs this year, folks. My wife actually was going out to go to the grocery store or something about an hour ago. When she went to kiss me goodbye, we both gave each other the cheek. Oh, man. How the world has changed. Wetsuits will be required attire. Elbow rubs. There you go. Yep, can't hug, shake any hands, gowned and gloved. There you go. All right, let's see. Did I have anything? Oh, so I talked about the oral landscape. That was exciting. I went on SoundCloud about an hour and a half ago. And when did they start putting ads on the right-hand side of the page on SoundCloud? I mean, I go on it fairly frequently. I don't remember those ads ever showing up there before. Hugs are out, shrugs are in. Yep. About a month ago. Wow. Yeah, I mean, these weren't even pop-ups. It was just like, you know, in a fixed location on the right-hand side. And I don't mind. You know, look, I understand, you know, you want to monetize your business. I get it. Darren Moss, can we do a second Quarantini where you play Taxi members' music? Yes, is the answer. I just haven't gotten that together again. Ariana, if you would be so kind, could you pester me about that so we can make a plan and execute that? What were we talking? Oh, the ads. But what is annoying about it is I noticed that the volume on the ads, they were audio ads, and the volume was like really kind of loud, and it sounded like it was like pushed too hard. I mean, several of them, not just one ad, but the audio was loud, and it was very top-endy and kind of grating sounding. What is the file type and size recommended for uploading for listings? I think that you can upload any size file and it automatically puts, I want to say 192 MP3. By the way, people ask me this question a lot. Why do you guys use MP3s? Because it can be moved around easily, and it is kind of an industry standard. And if they sign you, you'd be shocked, by the way, how many MP3s actually make it to air. But I would say that many libraries, I can't say this is true of all libraries, but many libraries, if they get an MP3 from Taxi or from you, and they want to put something in the catalog, that's the point where they reach out and ask you for a WAV file or whatever. That's right, and thank you, John. Man, you should work at Taxi, JP. You can all the tagging information goes nicely in an MP3. So it's just a really practical way. And by the way, I seriously don't know a video editor, which I forgot to call. That's what I was supposed to do right before the show, was call that video editor that says he would come on. Yes, it does. Ariana is correct. Our system converts all audio files to MP3s at 192. There you go. So I don't know of any editors that would go, oh my gosh, this is an MP3, I'm not going to use it. Now I know for the people that create music and work so hard to make it sound great and great mixes, that you worry, oh, gosh, I wouldn't want anything going on air, as an MP3. Probably much of the music that you hear in TV shows actually does come from MP3s. And of course, there are MP3s and MP3s, but it is an industry standard, especially, nobody in the industry likes getting music attached, and, even an MP3, they don't like attachments. First of all, you don't know if it's got any viruses or boogies in the attachment. Second of all, who the heck wants to eat up their hard drive with a zillion MP3s of stuff that they're going to listen to for a few seconds and go, nope, don't need it, and pass. Now they've got to delete it, trash it, blah, blah, blah. You're welcome for the July issue of Recording Magazine, Mark. No boogies. Can I tell the difference in quality? Honestly, I have done some A/B tests, and look, I'm 65 years old. My hearing's not as great as it was when I was 24 years old. Yes, I can absolutely hear the difference between a very low-level MP3 and a high-quality WAV file. Would the average person on the street notice? No. I do know that when they're mixing major motion pictures that they will ask for WAV files for that stuff, because people are going to hear it sitting in a theater, but they wouldn't even know. People sitting in the seats at a theater hearing something that just doesn't sound that good, they wouldn't know, unless here in LA you might have a room full of engineers. I don't know. Wow, you bought a console on eBay a few years ago. It's called an Alice in 1970. Whoa, I got to go back to that. It's a Neve clone 8-channel. Came out of a radio station. Sounds amazing. Wow, is it British? Designed by the same guy who designed Trident boards. Yeah, we were talking a bit about Tridents the other day. They were great sounding consoles. Yeah, I remember many years ago, I used to be actually pretty good friends with the CEO of SSL for many years, a guy named Piers Plaskett, who I believe is no longer there. But one night, Piers came over to my studio in New York, and we were listening. Got to remember, at the time, CDs were brand new. This was probably around 82, 83-ish, and CDs were just, you couldn't get every record on CD yet. So that gives you an indication of how new they were. And we sat down and listened to a Sony digital 2-track machine that worked on like 3/4-inch video cassettes. We listened to CDs. We listened to a 1/2-inch 2-track analog, all of the same song, and all from the same source, first generation from that source, or one generation away from that source. I can't remember what else we listened to, but we listened to like 5 of us just hung out in the control room that night with, like, our feet up and dinner and whatever else might have been going on. And we were just listening to all these different audio sources, digital versus analog. And you could clearly hear the difference between the analog, especially the half-inch 2-track tape, just sounded so good. And it did. It sounded better than CDs, but CDs have gotten way better over the years. Sometimes I'll put a CD in my car, mostly Steely Dan, and listen to it and go, wow, this just sounds amazing. Then I put vinyl on in my office and listen to that. And yeah, it's got surface noise from the vinyl. It's got clicks and pops. But there's just something about that sound that does sound good. Some libraries do remaster songs so they sound consistent over the entire library. I honestly believe that all libraries should do that. There's nothing that I really believe that just a simple level difference really puts a lower level difference, puts a song at disadvantage. If you listen to 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 songs in a row, and all of a sudden one of them is several dBs lower, you just don't feel it. You don't get the impact. It's kind of like, the mountain being farther away and having less visual detail. Cass, want to have a tricycle? Time flies. Yes, it does. Wow, I can't believe we're 50 minutes into this episode. We should make these quarantinis 2 hours long. Yeah, isn't that funny? Every library, Greg Croza says, every library I'm in asks for tracks at different levels. I'm still debating whether or not I could even find the time once we're back in the office, which is actually this coming Monday. We're back in the office, and I just don't know. I can't imagine finding the time to do quarantinis every day. However, I've had way more work to do since we've been remote, having Ariana and Bria to talk to many times a day on marketing stuff, talking to the guys in the A&R department about their stuff. Now that Deb is home, constantly coming downstairs and talking to me about member services stuff, talking to Angel about accounting stuff. In the office, that happens pretty organically. I tend to walk around the office a lot. And, I'll just stop in somebody's office. They've got a question, or they come down to my office with a question. I bet people will be doing less of that when we get back. Being at home and answering a million WhatsApp and texts and emails a day just made the workday last a lot longer. You should put an SSL in front of those patio doors. Your mixes would be incredible in that view. Your wife might not be as impressed. Well, here's a little secret. In our kitchen, we have an island, and it's got a cooktop on the island, and then it's got like a raised up part of the island. So if you're standing at the cooktop cooking, I wanted something that if we had some guests over and we were making appetizers, where we could cook it and just put it up on the island for them to eat. So we decided to raise it up to accommodate the height of stools. We didn't like the lower stools, we liked the higher stools. So when it came time to make the decision on how high the difference should be between the cooktop level and the serving level of the island, you're going to laugh at me for doing this, but I actually went online and looked at the dimensions of an SSL meter bridge. And I don't know why I had that idea or why I decided to go with it, but that's what I did. Is the difference between the top of an SSL and the top of the meter bridge on an SSL. That's the number I went with on the counter. Oh man, I am such a studio rat. Scott Hansen, you're embarrassing. No, you can't see the kitchen. When I started doing taxi TVs at home, my entire family said, don't show them the kitchen. I don't know why. I mean, it's a nice kitchen. It's not like people are going to look at it and go, oh my gosh, that needs to be an Architectural Digest. It's a few notches up from apartment living and a few notches down from a mansion. But for some reason, even my daughters said, because originally I had the camera. I think Ariana will remember this. That I had the camera set up so that the kitchen was the backdrop, and you could see we do it. We have a stainless steel venta hood, and recently got a new light fixture over the island, and I thought it looked kind of sexy. But man, I got in big trouble with the family, and so that's how we ended up with the halo and the door. Did I mount a meter bridge on the counter? No, but the reason I thought of that was I love to cook. I love to cook. I find it to be, it gives me the same rush that mixing would give me, okay? Taking, disparate elements, putting them all together, and knowing that if you're cooking something, um, balancing sweet and savory, for instance, that's like, how much direct signal do I want from the snare drum versus how much reverb do I want on it? Just knowing how to blend elements. So I remember talking or thinking it through. We were talking about the height of the cooktop and the height of the serving thing. That's what made me think cooking is like mixing. I know. I always liked the fact that I liked where the SSL meter bridge. They're different now, but back on the original SSLs. So that's what I did. That's what I went with. Why vent a hood when you can? You sound like an old Jewish grandma, like my Jewish grandma. Why vent a hood? What's my best dish? Whatever I'm making tonight. Actually, tonight I am making sushi hand rolls with imitation crab and cucumber and a little cream cheese and whatever else. Giovanni Lanza, I'm Italian. Want to speak about cooking? I would love to, man. I love the food in Italy. I would weigh 400 pounds if I lived in Italy. Incredible food there. I'm the kind of cook, I don't think I've ever used a recipe. But I will go to a website and see, I want to do braised Korean ribs in the Instapot tonight. So I'll go look at a recipe and go, okay, yeah, so it's brown sugar, soy sauce, garlic, onion, blah, blah, blah. And I don't actually sit there and measure stuff out. I just eyeball it and then taste it and go, yep, needs a little more soy sauce, needs a little more brown sugar, and just do it like that. Trev Fury says, the daily live streams have been amazingly informative and fun. Why, thank you. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's enjoyed and benefited from them. I hope you're able to continue. I want to. Emotionally, I want to continue. I just have to see if I can get my regular work done. I find that when I work at the office and come home at night, that basically I usually walk in the front door somewhere, or the back door from the garage, like between 7 and 7:30. And I tend to cook. At this point, I cook most dinners, except Deb will cook Friday nights. And if we have company over for a big gathering, Deb usually does the cooking for that. She's the kind of person that loves to cook like a big, Thanksgiving style meal, which we have big dinners. We do Shabbat dinners on Friday nights, and she makes, soups and salads. It's a multi-course dinner, and she goes all out for that stuff. But I tend to cook most of the Monday through, or Sunday through Thursday. Saturday night is pizza night. Yeah, I always feel a little embarrassed about doing the quarantinis. It's like, if you didn't know me and you didn't know Taxi and you'd never been to a quarantini before and you tuned into one of these or you watch it in the archives, would you think, why is this goofball showing people a picture of that mountain? And why is he talking about fishing? And why is he talking about gophers? I don't know. I mean, I started doing these to create a place for us to all hang out while we were quarantined. and knew that we would talk about some industry stuff and have tried to keep it educational. But, I can't make it like fully educational every day. Um, John Pearson cooks breakfast, milk over cereal. Nancy Callel. I tell people, you got to see this guy. Why? They need a good laugh. Oh, man. Taxi cookbook. Here's a little known fact that even most of my staff members don't know. And then we got to wrap this up because I've got a Zoom to Australia in 15 minutes. But I actually wrote a cookbook. Was never published because Taxi got in the way of it. But right around the time, in the months leading up to the start of Taxi, I was a bachelor. Had an apartment on the Upper West Side in Midtown Manhattan. Well, I guess technically not Midtown if you're in the Upper West Side, but 72nd in Columbus for those of you who are New Yorkers, a great neighborhood. I had been divorced for a year and a half, 2 years, and I was dating a lot. And some wise person said to me, you should invite young ladies over and make them dinner. That will blow them away because guys are usually like, you go to a guy's apartment and it's like pizza under the couch cushions and the bathroom hasn't been cleaned in several years. Floor hasn't been swept. I'm fairly neat, although my wife would argue that point with you. I do tend to like take off this shirt after Taxi TV and leave it on the back of this chair for 2 days. So I started to learn how to cook, and my dear friend of mine was married to a woman that had a father who loved to cook in Long Beach Island on the Jersey Shore. And sometimes while I was single, I would go down. Actually, when I was still married to my first wife, we would go to the parents' lovely, gorgeous, huge house on the Jersey Shore. And the father would cook. He would make like paella. I think that was the first thing he taught me how to make was paella. And I just fell in love with cooking. I always had a knack for it. I grilled a lot. I'd make eggs, basic run-of-the-mill cooking. But the day that he showed me how to make paella, and he was very much a seat-of-the-pants kind of cook, I said, okay, I now want to get into cooking. So as a single bachelor on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, I really got into cooking. And usually I would invite a young lady over and say, bring your roommate, bring a friend, and make dinner for the two of them. And they were always blown away that a guy could cook. So at some point, after I kept the apartment in New York because my daughters live back there, and I go back every other weekend, all birthdays and dance recitals, that kind of stuff with them. So I had needed a place back there and had an apartment out here. And I spent a lot of time on airplanes going back and forth. So I started writing a bachelor's cookbook. And I can't even remember the name of it, but it was basically, don't be a slob, don't be a moron. Be nice to the ladies and show them how wonderful you are by cooking them a lovely dinner with a nice presentation. And so I wrote the whole cookbook. I still have it on a 3.5-inch floppy disk somewhere. And there was a guy who was a pretty famous cookbook author that sold his stuff at Williams-Sonoma. Remember, for those of you who cook or read cookbooks, he basically took a big fat cookbook and then broke it up into just a book about beef, a book about chicken or poultry, another one about just desserts, another one about just vegetables. And he broke all these things up and made them separate books with beautiful photography in them. And, well, hello, Mrs. Lasko. She's home. That must mean the show's over. And he made these beautiful cookbooks. So I met with the guy about him being the editor and providing the photography for my cookbooks. And then he just said, nah, it's not the kind of thing that I do, but I think it's a really good project and you should do it. And then I started Taxi and just never did it. So there you go. There's my entire life about cooking. Hi, honey. Hi. They got to see the mountain. I was doing the explanation of mixing today with the oral landscape, so I turned the camera around and they got to see your umbrella and Molly's tricep.
Watch the video where you put all the
right. Well, that video, I don't even think that video is online anymore, but that's what inspired today's thing.
Cool.
Oh, now they're asking for you to go out in the backyard and dance around. No, I'm kidding. They're not.
Very funny.
Oh, look, we have matching shirts today.
Oh, that wasn't on purpose.
It's
That's because we both love Tiffany.
right. Yeah. Uh-huh. Anyway, so that's it. I've got to run because I've got to go do the Zoom to Australia. Hopefully, I think there's a good listing that's going to come out of it, although it's a really short turnaround thing for advertising. That is a fishing shirt that she's wearing. Although, as I've mentioned on the show before, she really doesn't like to go fishing with me all that much. And when she does, she makes me release everything, which I normally do anyway, unless I'm going to keep one for dinner that night. And she gives it a kiss on the lips, apologizes for her husband scaring the crap out of it, and then lets the fish go. So there you go. Have a great day, a great evening for many of you, except for Darren. And I will be back tomorrow for another exciting episode of Taxi's Quarantini Happy Hour. Until then, bye-bye. See you guys.